Welcome back to CBS News 24/7, where we continue watching the controversial choice of Matt Gaetz to serve in President-elect Donald Trump's administration. So it is a frenetic day on Capitol Hill. Appearances by Gaetz while lawmakers meet in the House Ethics Committee. That ethics group of lawmakers sitting down at this very moment to decide whether they should release their findings into alleged sexual misconduct and alleged illicit drug use against the intended Attorney General Gaetz. The committee faces growing pressure to release that report so that senators can consider the contents of that report during planned confirmation hearings set for the month of January. Well, just moments ago, Republican Senator Susan Collins reiterated some pretty big concerns about Matt Gaetz. Here's what she had to say.
Do you have any concerns about the allegations that are out there about him?
Well, of course. I said from the beginning that I was shocked by the nomination, given the many allegations, but that's why it's important that the Senate go through its process of making sure that we have a background check, that we have a Senate investigation, which involves extensive interviews and questionnaires, and then a public hearing.
And what about Pete Hegseth? What about Pete?
I have to go vote.
That is CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian with a microphone in the face of one of the lawmakers who has quite a bit to say. And by the way, that lawmaker is a Republican. Now, we want to point out that Gaetz denies any wrongdoing and characterized this investigation as a smear campaign. Meanwhile, President-elect Donald Trump doubled down on his choice, telling CBS News he will not reconsider his choice for Attorney General. Now, happening at the same time, Vice President-elect J.D. Vance continues holding crucial meetings with Republican senators to try to shore up support for some of Trump's more controversial choices for his cabinet. Joining those meetings today, as you might imagine, Mr. Gaetz and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. He's the pick for Defense Secretary. Republican Senator Neely Kennedy says he was one of the lawmakers tapped to speak with that group. Here's a little bit of what he had to say about those meetings.
Are you meeting with Gaetz today?
I am.
What do you hope to get out of the meeting, Senator?
I don't know. Matt and J.D. asked for the meeting, and, we may talk about the Dallas Cowboys.
Do they think you're an undecided? Do they think you're soft on this?
I have no idea. You'll have to talk to them. They just asked for a meeting, and I said, sure, I love meetings.
All right, so that was Scott McFarland, CBS News congressional correspondent, getting that question off. Meanwhile, Stephanie Lai is the national politics reporter at Bloomberg News. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us. So Washington leaking like a sieve, really, over the Gaetz matter. Is there any indication that given the weight of what could be in that House ethics report, that sometime today we could just see him bow out, throw his arms up in the air because things are too damning?
I mean, at this point, it's too soon to say what could or couldn't happen, but I do think what we're seeing on the Hill right now play out is indicative of the fact that the Trump and Vance transition team is narrowly focused on getting these nominations and picks through the finish line. The fact that they're already meeting with lawmakers now before Thanksgiving and they're continuing these meetings well into November is a good sign that they're not backing down. As Trump mentioned earlier this week, he's not rescinding his support behind Matt Gaetz or Hegseth, it appears. So it definitely does seem like a lot of folks in Washington are just narrowly focused on getting this through.
Well, the Trump administration, as they start to form the cabinet picks, they're throwing arguably one of the largest pieces of weight behind this. Vice President-elect J.D. Vance is the one setting up these meetings with Republican lawmakers, senators to rally support. What's the significance of J.D. Vance up there doing that?
Well, I mean, as a sitting senator, he is one of the main people who will connect the Trump campaign and the Trump administration with people on the Hill. It's definitely telling of his responsibility and the influence that he holds as the incoming vice president, that he's tasked with something like this so early on, before the administration even kicks off. He is playing a key role in seeing through with Trump's agenda.
All right, nice to have this conversation with you. We appreciate you joining us there in Washington, D.C. We know it's a busy day where you are. So let's bring in CBS News political reporter Jake Rosen for more on the Trump transition. You know, earlier today, the president-elect tapped former acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker to serve as NATO ambassador. From your vantage point there in West Palm Beach, the water glistening there behind you, walk us through the importance of this role under the Trump administration.
Well, if you listen to what Donald Trump's promises have been on the campaign trail to end the war in Ukraine before potentially he even takes office on January 20th, 2025, this role is crucial. And in terms of what Donald Trump did in the first administration, too, in getting some of these countries who had not been paying, quote, their fair share, as Donald Trump really ran on in 2015 and 2016, he did accomplish that. Some parts of NATO and some countries were able to pay more. Now, Whitaker has a little bit of a different view than what Donald Trump has, interestingly enough. As someone who doesn't really have foreign policy experience, he's been asked repeatedly what the role of the U.S. in terms of NATO and Ukraine is, and he says, as a world leader and world superpower, it's on us to pay more than other countries and to not necessarily even the playing field across NATO. So we'll have to see. It looks like Donald Trump is reaffirming his commitment to NATO. Whitaker has said he supports the organization, and we'll see exactly what Whitaker's role is if there is any kind of movement on a negotiation front between Russia and Ukraine, with the U.S. being in the center of it as we get in the next couple of weeks and months.
All right, and I just have to ask you, because you are closest in proximity, at least from a geographical standpoint, to President-elect Donald Trump, are you hearing anything out of Mar-a-Lago about any strings he's pulling to try to get some more backup for Matt Gaetz, he's up to his knees in controversy today?
I have not directly, but in talking with some Trump allies over the last couple of days, you do notice that there is this kind of push that Donald Trump is committed to this. You saw what he said yesterday to one of our colleagues in Texas, saying that he's not reconsidering that post. And also, we have to remember that he's really banking a lot of his political capital on this without having to come out and say more than he said yesterday. He's hoping that at least, 2 or 3 maybe senators are going to drop off at least. We'll see whether that number can get over that 50% mark that J.D. Vance would have to tie break in terms of getting Gaetz confirmed. But we've also seen some op-eds against him in the New York Post, a big publication that Donald Trump reads all the time, coming out against the Gaetz and Tulsi Gabbard pick too. So Donald Trump facing some headwinds within his own party, within the Republican ecosystem of conservative media, and also down here in Florida.
Republican Susan Collins among them. They need her vote. Okay, Jake, thank you so much. For our viewers, we want to let you know this. Just moments ago, Judiciary Committee Chairman Dick Durbin got right to the point about the Gaetz investigation. We just got this. He had this to say about that looming report and the president-elect's decision to tap Gaetz for Attorney General. Listen.
The fact of the matter is this individual resigned from the House of Representatives so this report would not be made public. Let's get to the bottom line here. He does not want it to be made public, and there must be something in there that scares the hell out of him.
Sir, how many?
Let's go live to Washington Post political reporter Leanne Caldwell. You heard him say that right there. He's saying squarely, this is why Gaetz resigned so quickly. Is that the consensus there on Capitol Hill?
Well, we don't know exactly for sure why Gaetz resigned so quickly because we don't know what is inside Gaetz's head. But I will say, when you put the pieces together, it seems like perhaps that is absolutely the reason why he resigned. So it's an interesting split screen that's happening on Capitol Hill right now. On one hand, you have Vice President-elect J.D. Vance meeting with senators and Matt Gaetz about this upcoming confirmation process. And then on the other hand, you have the House Ethics Committee who is meeting, and they are discussing whether they should release this ethics report or not. So you have Matt Gaetz trying to tell senators, just give me a chance. Let this process go through. I'm told by senators who have met with Gaetz today that he is denying any sort of allegations and that he's saying, just give me a fair shake. Let this process move forward, and I'll show you that I'm able to do this job. But this ethics report is still hanging over his head, and you have attorneys from some of the victims who are coming out and speaking. So it's a very difficult situation and quite a contrast up here on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, and a lot of the conversation, a lot of the wind in our conversations is going into what could be in that House ethics report, the contents of that. But today, arguably, isn't it really about Matt Gaetz taking the temperature of those lawmakers whose green light he needs in order to get confirmation through? And if he gets a sense that he cannot, in those meetings, get the green light, is there a possibility that he would look at the numbers on the board and just say, not worth it?
We'll see. Matt Gaetz and Donald Trump are two people who are not known to back away from a fight and to retract from a fight in the sense of like stepping down. So I think that it's premature, most likely, for that to happen at this stage in the process. The earliest these confirmation hearings are going to happen is in January, after Donald Trump is sworn into office. But there's this constant trickle of information and this cloud that is hanging over Gaetz's nomination process that could become ultimately too problematic. But you heard Donald Trump last night say that he's standing by Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz is here, as I said, talking to senators, trying to ask them to give him a chance. And so this could continue to be a storyline for the next weeks, maybe even the next couple months. And it's going to be up to Donald Trump and Matt Gaetz on if they're going to push through. We have not yet seen the full force of Trump and his allies on what they can do to try to pressure these senators. It just hasn't happened yet. And so I think that we're going to have to wait to see how that happens before it becomes clear what senators are going to do.
Well, if I'm sitting in hometown USA in a coffee shop, I'm thinking to myself, just release the House Ethics Report, let the American people decide, and then communicate back to their elected representatives. You and I know what the mechanism is there and why so many people are struggling with whether to actually greenlight the release of that. Explain for our viewers that might have that very simple question, why there's this hesitation to release that report.
Well, there's likely very damning evidence about Matt Gaetz in that report. Speaker Mike Johnson last week said that he wanted that report released. He went to Mar-a-Lago and then the next day he said that report should not be released. Matt Gaetz does not want that report to be released. One of the things that Matt Gaetz is saying, though, is that he's pointing to the fact that the Department of Justice looked into this and did not charge him. That is a key part of his own personal defense and what he is telling senators. And so there's also something to be said in this post-truth era, especially when, Donald Trump has overcome his own legal troubles, his own criminal investigations as well, and as president of the United States. You could very much expect them to spin this as Matt Gaetz being a victim of a political witch hunt because people don't like his politics. That's something that Lindsey Graham started to hint at this morning when he was talking to reporters after he met with Matt Gaetz. He said that he's not going to be part of what's become a lynch mob about this nomination process. And so we are just at the very early stages, and we can expect this to develop, and we can expect the defense on Gaetz's behalf and on Trump team's behalf to only intensify.
So nice to talk to you, Leanne Caldwell, Washington Post political reporter. And for our viewers at home, it bears mentioning once again that Matt Gaetz denies any wrongdoing in statements through his attorney. Thank you so much for joining us. When we come back, we will go back to the sentencing of Jose Ibarra. A judge earlier today found him guilty on all counts of killing a nursing student, when she was just out for a jog. The families read victim impact statements, and next the judge will tell Jose Ibarra what the rest of his life will look like. We're back after the break. CBS News 24/7 watching breaking news continuing to come out of the state of Georgia. The man accused of killing 22-year-old nursing student Laken Riley, guilty on all charges. So a judge really wasted no time in deciding Jose Ibarra's fate after Ibarra waived a jury trial. So we expect sentencing at any moment. But while we wait for that, Laken's family members and friends have one by one stood in front of a judge talking about the woman who was lost on that very brutal and violent day. This is what we heard from Laken's father moments ago.
I stand here today as a grieving father whose heart was shattered in ways I never thought possible. My daughter, Laken Riley, was not just our child. She was the light of my life, the person who brought joy to every room she entered. And now that light has been extinguished forever, taken from us in the most senseless and violent way imaginable. The pain I feel is unexplainable. Every day I am reminded that my daughter is gone. I will never hear her laugh again, never see her smile, never hold her hand or feel her hug. She was taken from us, from her family, from her friends, from her future. Our world has been torn apart, and no matter what happens here today, nothing will ever bring her back. I am haunted by the thought of the fear she must have felt in those final moments, and it breaks my heart knowing that she suffered. I have to live with the fact that I could not protect her when she needed me the most. The pain of not being there, of not being able to stop what happened to her, is something I will never escape. My daughter had so many dreams, so many hopes for the future. She had worked so hard to become a nurse, to work with children and spread the love of God. She was a loving, kind, and intelligent young woman. She had so much to offer the world.
Listening to Laken Riley's father talk about how his daughter wanted so much to live serving others as a nurse, saving lives and helping life to be more healthy in our world, only to have her own snuffed out. Let's go live once again to CBS News correspondent Manuel Bojorquez. He's outside the courtroom. Manuel, just really quickly, I have to let you know we're watching what's going on in the courtroom. I may, my friend, have to interrupt you if that judge goes into the sentencing phase, but I have to ask you, you've been in that courtroom, you've seen Jose Ibarra. I watched him during the mom and the sister in that victim impact statement. He was stone cold until they called him a monster and the embodiment of evil. What have you seen from Jose Ibarra sitting there in the courtroom day in and day out?
Yeah, really no emotion from him, no reaction really to the verdict or to what people are now saying about him. He's gone from suspect now to convicted murderer. We also have heard in these victim impact statements that you listened in on, her mother, Laken Riley's mother, talk about the void in her life. And as you said, she referred to him as a monster. Her little sister said, look, we've lost so much, but also the sense of security, of not being able to go out or even on a run. Her roommates have said we're afraid to even go on a run because of what this man did. This is all part of a traditional sentencing hearing, and yes, if the judge decides to hand out that sentence, please go to that, because we're all curious to see what will happen here. The prosecution has asked for a maximum penalty of life in prison without the possibility of parole. As you mentioned, not a jury trial, so the judge will make that decision, as he did with the verdict.
And we are watching, while you and I have this conversation, live images inside the courtroom. You're also seeing that bailiff there standing very close, a barrier between Jose Ibarra and the family members. I have to imagine that this is excruciating for family members to stand that close to the person the sister referred to in pointing at him, saying, that man, now that they know that he is a convicted murderer.
That's right. You heard her sister say, I hate even being in the same room with him. And they've had to endure that for the last 4 days. That's how long the trial has lasted. It has been incredibly difficult for them to sit through because, of course, in the prosecution laying out this case, there has been graphic testimony and evidence shown of the attack on Laken Riley. There have been times where her mom has sobbed in court and where the family and friends have had to walk out because it's simply too difficult to listen to what he was accused of doing to her. When the detectives were talking about the way her clothing was found, in describing the attempted rape that the prosecution was laying out, the rocks that were used to essentially bash in her skull. You can imagine how difficult it is, and how difficult this all has been, of course, since February when this happened.
How did DNA evidence play in the judge's decision?
Huge. He said that really he could not ignore what he called overwhelming evidence against the defendant in this case. So what are we talking about? Well, there was DNA found underneath her fingernails. The prosecution put a GBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigation detective, on the stand who said that DNA matches Jose Ibarra and excludes his brothers. The defense was trying to paint a picture where his brothers, they said, may have been the ones who did it, but the judge was not buying that based on that DNA evidence. Also, in a jacket that he was said to be throwing away by the prosecution on video, they found not only his DNA, but her hairs and therefore her DNA, all of that linking him to the attack.
If you're just now joining our conversation on CBS News 24/7 to our viewers, we're just talking about the fact that the man you see on the screen in that plaid shirt, Jose Ibarra, has just been found guilty on all counts of killing nursing student Laken Riley in the state of Oklahoma, and just a tragic case. And we are now awaiting, after victim impact statements, the judge that you see here in this live video feed on our monitors in that courtroom, the judge leveling that sentence. Now let's talk about those victim impact statements, Manuel. How important are they in a judge's decision?
they're very important. I mean, this is a chance for them to finally get everything that they are feeling out in open court, and for the judge to consider the horrific impact and toll that this crime has had on their lives, not only on the family, but you're hearing again from friends and roommates that say to this day they're afraid to go out for a run because of what happened to their friend Laken Riley. The speed of this trial has been something really to behold because the defense decided to forego a jury trial, so they haven't had to do jury instructions, and the judge already knows what to do. The defense and the prosecution pretty much just said, look, these are the facts and the evidence according to us, and then he decides. So we're expecting that as soon as these impact statements wrap up, the judge may indeed just decide to hand down that sentence from the bench.
All right, and we await that from the state of Georgia. My apologies for the misspeak earlier. Manuel Bojorquez, stay there. We know that we'll be talking to you a little bit later in this broadcast. We thank you so much. All right, as we await that sentencing decision by the judge, we are also watching all kinds of breaking news out of Washington, D.C. CBS News 24/7, that's what we do. We watch our monitors for all developments all over the country. We've got our finger on the pulse of many big stories. We'll have the latest coming back. Welcome back, everybody. Our video monitors take us to Ukraine, where the U.S. Embassy shuts down today, warning embassy staff that Russia may launch a significant air attack on Ukraine. So the warning comes after Ukraine fired American-made missiles into Russia for the first time yesterday. So a lot of tension to talk about here. They're ramping up. Biden administration taking action today to support Ukraine even further. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin says the U.S. will now allow Ukraine to use American-supplied anti-personnel landmines. Take a listen to this.
The landmines that we would look to provide them would be landmines that are not persistent. You know, we can control when they would self-activate, self-detonate, and that makes it far more safer eventually than the things that they are creating on their own. We've talked to them about how they would potentially employ these weapons and make sure that they're doing things responsible, recording where they're putting their mines, and make sure that they take advantage of the self-detonating qualities of these weapons. So we provided them anti-tank mines from the very beginning, and because of the way that the fight has evolved, this is just another stage here. But again, our focus is to help them. Is to meet their needs, and they've asked for these, and so I think it's a good idea to provide.
All right, Secretary Lloyd Austin there. Let's go now to CBS News Pentagon office. Ellie Watson, so is this all about, when we speak about these landmines, is this about those North Korean troops that have now joined Russia? Is that what this really is about?
The shift in the anti-personnel landmines is part of the Biden administration's response to over 11,000 North Korean troops showing up in the Kursk region of Russia. The shift, that arrival of the North Korean troops also shifted the Biden administration's policy on the use of Army tactical missile systems, or what we call ATACMS, which are those missiles that have a longer range of about 190 miles. Right. Just the other day, we reported the administration lifted the ban on Ukraine using those within Russia. For months, the administration had been reluctant to lift that ban because of how Russia may retaliate and because of the limited supply of ATACMS the U.S. has. But the arrival of these 11,000 troops in Kursk pushed the Biden administration towards changing the policy and allowing Ukraine to use them, because the administration argues involving troops from another country, from North Korea, is actually what escalates the conflict.
All right, and so we're also aware of this warning relative to the U.S. Embassy there and literally shutting their doors. Is there a concern that perhaps could take a hit from Russia today?
Well, concern over Russia's response to these policy shifts definitely contributes to why the embassy shut down today. A U.S. official just told CBS that there are indications Russia is preparing to test a new missile and potentially preparing to test it in Ukraine. So out of an abundance of caution, the U.S. has shut down the embassy for the day. Now, it's important to note that the shift in the ATACM policy, the shift in the anti-personnel landmine policy that you mentioned are part of the Biden administration's approach and attempt in the short time it has left to get Ukraine in the best negotiating place it can before the Trump administration comes in case President Trump decides to cut off the aid and force Ukraine to the negotiating table to end the war.
All right, fascinating times, and we know you are watching all of these developments as they break worldwide. Ellie, thank you so much. Always good to talk to you on CBS News 24/7. Be well. Let's talk about weather, and a big weather event at that. You see it spinning out there over the water. It's called a bomb cyclone. Right now it's hitting the northwest United States, and it's already proven deadly. Power is out to more than 500,000 homes, most of them in Washington state. In fact, video to our monitors letting us really see and even hear what the impact of that storm looks and sounds like. Watch. So that's what it looks and sounds like in that Seattle suburb there. You're not only seeing the debris coming off of those trees, but you're hearing the impact of winds. So let's talk more about the impact. Thousands of people without electricity at this moment. Look at this, more than 641,000 customers, lights out in Seattle, Tacoma, and other neighboring cities there. And then the blackout also affecting more than 8,000 homes in Oregon. Then in California, just down that coastline, they're approaching 3,000 people whose lights are knocked out by this atmospheric river driven by that bomb cyclone. So let's bring in Jess to talk about this. You are the person that people in the path of this bomb cyclone and the ensuing atmospheric river want to hear from, Jess.
Current conditions from this bomb cyclone, it has been impressive. I mean, we're talking about an atmospheric river really fixating its way into California, Northern California, Southern Oregon, expected to receive anywhere up to around 10 to 15 inches of rain in certain communities. So as we take a look at the radar and where the storm is continuing to track, we're dealing with heavy storms. The Sierras and the Cascades dealing with heavy snow as well, and the winds are gusting anywhere up to around 70 miles per hour. Taking a look behind me right now, here's where the storm is at, this strong bomb cyclone. First of this season, continuing to bring in heavy rain for communities anywhere from Seattle all the way down into Portland. And the big concern right now, of course, has to do with a lot of power outages for community members wide stretch throughout the Pacific Northwest. This will continue to stick around as we head into the evening hours tonight, early morning hours tomorrow, with forecasted numbers very impressive, especially over into Northern California. By Friday, they're still expected to see showers all the way down into the Bay Area, with the Sierra expected to get close to around 2 to 4 feet of snow, with those gusty winds causing concerns when it comes to avalanche activity up into that region as well. So taking a look at the past 72 hours, we're going to continue to update these numbers, but we're already up to around 5 inches in certain communities in Oregon, Crescent City and Eureka, dealing with over 1 to 2 inches of rain so far. So this has been a very strong storm so far, and it just kicked off in Northern California earlier this morning, and we'll continue to watch it develop heading into the next couple days.
We're watching it. Okay, thank you so much, Jess. Well, a guilty verdict in a murder trial, a nursing student killed, her family reading victim impact statements, and we await any moment a judge telling a man named Jose Ibarra what the rest of his life will look like. We're awaiting a sentencing right there in that courtroom. As soon as we see it, you'll see it. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. We continue watching Capitol Hill for all things Matt Gaetz. So here's where we are at this hour. The House Ethics Committee meeting today to discuss whether the group there should release its findings into sexual misconduct allegations against intended Attorney General nominee Matt Gaetz. We know that Gaetz already denied any wrongdoing here. Earlier today, Republican Senator Susan Collins once again expressed her concern over the Gaetz choice. Take a listen.
Do you have any concerns about the allegations that are out there about him?
Well, of course. I said from the beginning that I was shocked by the nomination, given the many allegations, but that's why it's important that the Senate go through its process of making sure that we have a background check, that we have a Senate investigation, which involves extensive interviews and questionnaires, and then a public hearing.
And what about Pete Hegseth? What about Pete?
I have to go vote.
Questions from CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killion, getting the answers there from someone who is prime political real estate for Republicans. That Senator Susan Collins, they need her vote to get some of these picks through. Judiciary Committee Chairman Dick Durbin also voicing his opinion. He repeated his call for that report to be released. Here is what he said to Scott McFarlane with CBS.
The fact of the matter is that this individual resigned from the House of Representatives so this report would not be made public. Let's get to the bottom line here. He does not want it to be made public, and there must be something in there that scares the hell out of him.
Sir, how many?
So let's bring in CBS News political reporter Hunter Woodall live from our Washington headquarters. At this point in the day, can we actually say that the call for this report to be released is a bipartisan call?
Well, what's clear here is that there is obviously interest from Senate Republicans who are the ones who would be needed to confirm Mr. Gaetz for Attorney General. There's a sense that some of them want to see this report. And again, in a very narrow Senate, a very narrow Republican Senate, just a few senators really can have a massive amount of influence and massive sway on what happens here. Now, I'll say, House Ethics is usually a very bipartisan committee. This has obviously really, upended how this committee works, and obviously, the intervention of Speaker Mike Johnson and his words has caused a lot of unease in Washington so far.
All right, we appreciate the conversation. We want to just let you know that we apologize for interrupting you, but we've been following the sentencing of a man named Jose Ibarra, found guilty in recent hours of that nursing student and her murder. Let's go to the courtroom right now and listen in to the sentencing in the case of Laken Riley.
There's very little, including the sentence of Mr. Ibarra, that's going to help much, and I acknowledge that. With that, Mr. Ibarra, if you will please stand. Count 1, malice murder. I sentence you to life without the possibility of parole. Count 2 will be vacated as a matter of operation of law. Count 3 vacated by operation of law. Count 4 vacated by operation of law. Count 5, life in prison consecutive to count 1. Count 6, 20 years to serve consecutive to count 5. Count 7 will merge with count 1. Count 8, 12 months consecutive to count 6. Strike that. 12 months, but I don't want it to 6. It's just going to be consecutive. Count 9, 12 months consecutive. Count 10, 5 years consecutive to count 6. So that would mean the misdemeanors would come after the felonies. That will be the sentence. Mr. Ibarra, I will advise you that you have 30 days from today to seek any post-judgment relief in the form of a motion for a new trial or appealing this case directly. If you make a motion for a new trial and that is denied, you have 30 days from that date to file your first appeal, first level of appeal. Court will appoint a lawyer to represent you if you cannot afford one. I'll also advise you that you have 4 years from the date that your conviction becomes final in order to file a habeas corpus petition. Mr. Donnelly, can you tell me, are you all going to be involved in the next stage?
That remains to be seen, but my understanding is that we will remain on at the court's appointment until, unless relieved by conflict counsel.
All right, and you'll make those arrangements.
We will communicate that with Mr. Ibarra and with the court.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Ms. Ross?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. It's going to take a little. Yeah, can we take the? Okay, that'll be fine. Can do that.
Everybody remain seated, please.
All right. That will conclude the proceedings.
And that is the last time you will likely ever see on television or elsewhere video, live or otherwise, of a man named Jose Ibarra escorted out of a state of Georgia courtroom after learning his sentence. Found guilty on the same day of those murder charges against the nursing student Laken Riley. Following that, victim impact statements from her mother, from her father, from sisters, and those who knew and loved her best. Let's bring back Manuel Bojorquez. He's been inside that courtroom. You heard the emotional reaction when they said the words, life without the possibility of parole.
Exactly, and that's what the family had asked for in those victim impact statements. That is the maximum penalty that the prosecution had asked for in this case. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. That is his fate. As to that one count of malice murder, there were, of course, as you heard, there are several other counts against him. The judge wasting no time in considering giving him that maximum sentence that the prosecution was looking for here. This morning wasted no time after closing arguments in issuing the guilty verdict in this case, saying that the overwhelming evidence was simply too much, in his view, to ignore.
Manuel, we know that the state where you are has the death penalty. Do we have any sense as to why the prosecution and the family went for life in prison without the possibility of parole?
We're really not privy to how that decision was made by the prosecution or by the defense. We've spoken with legal experts who say, look, these capital punishment cases tend to be so long and drawn out, and there's, of course, appeal after appeal after appeal that happens, decades into these cases, that maybe they felt that this was the best route to just get him off the streets and into prison for the rest of his life.
I think it's appropriate that while we talk to you, we are seeing on the screen Laken Riley's photos there so that the public can remember in these cases. As I said earlier in this broadcast, all of these criminal cases are really about the victim, not about the person found guilty or accused. These cases are about the people whose lives were lost. Laken Riley, who would have lived her life to become a mother, a wife, and a nurse serving our world and our country, gone from this world. And now Jose Ibarra is gone from our view. Life in prison without parole. Manuel, thank you so much to your team for your coverage these many weeks. Still ahead, talking tech and Target. Our nose to NVIDIA in our Money Watch report with Kelly O'Grady. Our live conversation when we come back. CBS News 24/7 on the Money Watch right now. Investors anxiously awaiting the earnings report from chip maker NVIDIA after the closing bell, since the company has really been a huge leader in AI. CBS Money Watch reporter Kelly O'Grady joins me now live. Kelly, NVIDIA has really seen its share of challenges, some volatility lately. What are we expecting today, my friend?
Yeah, so Reed, this is kind of all about, this is a problem of its own success. The last few earnings report, we've seen triple-digit growth in profit. And so a lot of investors are thinking, okay, well, that's really not sustainable. And so what we're expecting tonight, we're going to hear about how their Blackwell chip is doing. And there's concerns that there might be soft demand. But Reed, I really go back to what NVIDIA is, their chips drive the growth that we are seeing in the AI industry that's exploding. So think about the chips. They're essentially, it powers all the usage of AI. Think about what Intel chips did for the internet industry. And so if you're NVIDIA and you are making the building blocks of the AI industry and you don't have that many competitors, they're far ahead anyone else in the market.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of people buying your chips. And so we're going to kind of see, are people buying as much as they were? What does that mean for the AI industry? I can tell you their stock has slipped a little bit, but it is up close to 200% to date. How NVIDIA performs today, Reed, I mean, this is going to really have an impact on the market. If it does well, you're going to see all of the tech stocks follow with it. If it falters a little bit, and by the way, faltering might just mean that it doesn't have triple-digit growth,
right.
Then you could see the stock and many other stocks slip along with it. So definitely one to watch.
One to watch, and literally it could make history. And NVIDIA is new. AI is relatively new as far as the length of tech things go. Let's talk about chips of a different sort. I buy them at a place called Target. You're talking about Target today and holiday shopping. I don't buy NVIDIA at Target, but I do buy my Doritos there, Kelly.
I buy my Cheez-Its there, Reed, so
Okay.
maybe we'll see each other at some point. But look, the stock is down close to 20% today, and that's because they had a really big miss on their earnings report. The headline is people are not shopping at Target as much as they were. And if you think about it, you and I might buy our chips there, but it's really not a grocery hub. The stuff that you buy there is more of a nice to have, not a need to have. That's very different than what we saw from Walmart yesterday. And on the call constantly, you heard the CEO say, our customers, they're value driven, they're hunting for bargains, we're trying to discount our prices, but they're not necessarily coming to Target because that's the stuff that's called discretionary spending. It's nice to have, not a need to have. That's why you saw Walmart do so well yesterday, because they've tapped into that customer need, Reed.
Okay, customer need something to talk about. Okay, tomato, Jaguar or Jaguar, however you say it, you have something interesting about that luxury car company and a little bit of a campaign news there. The new ads don't really have any cars in them. What the heck is going on there?
Yeah, so this is all part of the Jaguar rebrand. I say Jaguar, but they're coming out with a new line of cars, and it's a surprise. So they can't put it in the campaign. Back up, they have struggled with sales. They've lost that ultra premium luxury market. They haven't been able to tap into the competitors like BMW and Mercedes in that premium market. And so they've gone with a rebrand. And if you watch the ad, it's a lot of colors, a lot of kind of high fashion couture that it seems like they were going for. But really, seems like it's more appealing to a Gen Z market. If you're trying to compete with the Rolls Royces of the world, which is where their new line of car is going to try and go, Gen Zs don't really have a ton of money. I know some of them do, but the social media reaction to this campaign, Reed, has just been so terrible. People are saying you've missed the mark. You're not showing me the car. I don't even know what Jaguar is from this. And so it feels like they were trying to go with vibes more than anything, Reed. And the customers don't seem to be buying the vibes yet. We'll see when the car comes out.
I'm sorry. I just can't. And I just won't. But they look good. Couture, just not a car. Kaylee O'Grady, nice to talk Cheez-Its, Doritos, tomato, NVIDIA, and all things money with you, my friend. Have a good day. Wow. That's it for CBS News 24/7. What are you wearing while you're driving? I'm going to have to think about this for many, many days. The Jaguar and the ads and the news. It continues. CBS News 24/7. You see that door we're looking at next to the American flag? On the right, the word ethics. And on the inside, the Ethics Committee. Behind that door, conversations happening about a report into allegations against one of President-elect Donald Trump's choices to be a major force in his future administration. More on this story and breaking news on CBS News 24/7.